Thank you for joining us. It's been I know it's a busy time. Well, first, condolences to your family for the loss earlier last
Thank
week.
You for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So we are recording. We're going to record this session as we always do. It's on the record, and we'll be posting videos from the session as well. And before, we've got a bunch of folks on here to ask you questions, and Vaughn is dialing in for Victoria as well. But before we ask you questions, we'd like to give you an opportunity to tell our viewers why the NDP government deserves their vote again this time around.
Well, thank you, Harold. I am John Horgan. I am on the unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I'd like to say at an undisclosed location in the Lower Mainland, but it's fairly apparent by the backdrop that I'm in downtown Vancouver with Burrard Inlet behind me. And it is a real privilege and honor to have had the opportunity to be Premier for the past 3.5 years. And I'm asking British Columbians to support me again because I believe we focused on the things that matter to British Columbians. We focused on people and the services that they need. We've tried to reduce costs to the greatest extent possible. And those services are not just those that have been traditionally provided, but also looking at other ways that government can make life better for British Columbians. We've got a significant capital plan ahead of us that will be building the infrastructure we need for today and for the future. And I believe that we have assembled the best slate of candidates the NDP has ever assembled, people from every corner of the province focused on making life better in the regions, in our urban centres, in our suburbs, and in rural areas. We have diverse candidates, 53% women, 24 people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, 5 Indigenous candidates, people with disabilities, as well as young candidates. And I believe that we have reflected the diversity of British Columbia in our team. And I believe that the best way to have inclusion and equality in British Columbia is to have people see themselves reflected in their public institutions, not just the legislature, but the public service, as well as a host of other parts of our system where you've got police, law enforcement, fire, and so on. And of course, the most important thing in all of this is getting through the pandemic. None of us anticipated the situation we find ourselves in. We've worked very, very hard to make sure that we're providing for the people of the communities that are being affected, as well as ensuring that British Columbia can continue to lead the way with our response, the public health response, as well as the response to our recovery. So I believe that British Columbians want to get through this most extraordinary time. We've been all turned upside down. I believe we've done a good job for the past 7 months, but the challenges ahead of us are unprecedented. And I believe that the government of British Columbia needs to be secure and steady and stable. And that's why we're here in an election campaign, so that we can provide that for the next 4 years.
All right, thank you. So we'll get right into questions. We'll start with reporter Jennifer Saltman.
All right. So Elections BC anticipates it could take until mid-November or later to count the mail-in ballots. I think they're at over 700,000 requests right now. So we might not have a government until December. Is there any concern that this represents 2 or 3 months without a cabinet and legislature, you know, when we're dealing with the biggest health and economic challenge of our times?
Well, we do have a cabinet right now. I am the Premier, and I am the Premier until there's a new one. So we have what's called a caretaker government in place at the moment of the campaign. Carol James, the Deputy Premier and Finance Minister, is administering the business of government and the business of the people of BC. I believe that the extended counting period is not surprising in light of the pandemic. And I think that we've seen an uptake in mail-in balloting that will likely be the norm going forward. So I'm encouraged by that, and I don't believe that there will be any misstep in terms of the delivery of services as a result of the election.
Okay, Vaughn Palmer.
Good day, Premier. In the radio debate yesterday, you said something about sightseeing for the first time, or at least the first time I've heard you say it, which is if the scientific and economic arguments that come back from the review, from the Milburn review, suggest that the project is on the wrong track, the government will do what is necessary. Does that mean that you're contemplating for the first time the possibility you might have to put a stop to the project?
Well, you know this project very well, Vaughn, and you know that it wasn't one that we would have started had it been our choice. We made a decision in the early days of our mandates to ensure that British Columbians weren't saddled with a massive debt for no outcome. We've seen now increased costs as a result of the pandemic, as a slowdown in work happened as a result of public health measures. Now we've also discovered that there are some engineering technical issues that are being reviewed by Peter Milburn. I believe the appropriate course of action is to wait for his report and then take stock on the situation and make the best decision for British Columbians. And that's what I said yesterday, and I've certainly committed to that today.
But you appointed the executive chair, Ken Peterson. You could call him up and say, look, at least give me an idea of what I'm looking at here. Is this doable, and what's it going to cost?
Well, in order to make that call, I need to have the data, and that's what Mr. Milburn is bringing together. I think it's premature until we see the final work to make a determination. I haven't made that call, and I won't until I see what the document says and what Mr. Milburn reports back to government.
Can I ask you what was the motivation of that video you posted yesterday of the chat with your old rugby buddy, Mr. Weaver? Is that just trying to really kick the Greens to the sidelines and rub it in that he's supporting you for re-election?
I'm not rubbing in anything. We worked very well together, as you know, to put in place Clean BC, not just with Andrew, but with the entire Green Caucus. I joked I had a bit of rugby playing during a ball around, and I was spinning it on my finger, and I said in the 2013 to 27 period, or 2017 period, Andrew would have tackled me and buried me in the ground. But from 2017 onward, he would have said, pass me the ball and let's do this together. So I believe that I have a genuine affection for Andrew that I didn't think possible, and I think he feels the same way. We accomplished a great deal together. I'm proud of that. He's proud of that.
Thank you, Vaughn. You did herald CASA, of course, and the Alliance as a success multiple times that benefited British Columbians, at least until you called the election. So how are you going to feel if the Greens are wiped out in this election?
Well, it's not about the Liberals, the Greens, the NDP. It's about the people of BC. And we did not contemplate in 2017 a global pandemic. We did not contemplate the consequences to public health or the consequences to our economy. CASA is largely either underway or completed. And I believe it's critically important after 3.5 years that British Columbians have confidence that their government's looking after their interests every day, not looking forward to the next election. So I believe putting the election behind us allows us to focus on the needs of British Columbians. I think it's appropriate. It's never a bad idea to ask people where they want to go and who they want to lead them. That's what we're doing right now.
All right. Next question from Managing Editor Valerie Castleton.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Horgan. Thanks for joining us here. I just want to come back to the question that Jennifer Saltman asked you. You said to her, well, we do have a cabinet and basically you're it. So
I didn't say that. I said there is a cabinet in place until there's a new one. And that's the whole cabinet.
Okay. So, yes, okay. So we're talking a little bit about Sonia first and now about the Greens. So you don't have perhaps the level of cooperation from her and from her party that you did before. So would you be concerned about that, and would you care about that during an interim period?
No. Well, the legislature seats have been vacated. The Executive Council has not. The legislature has been dissolved. The cabinet has not. So I am no longer the member of the legislature for Langford Wanda Fuca, but I am still the premier. And that's a nuance, I suppose, but it's the reality of how our parliamentary system operates. So the relationship matters not at this point. Having said that, I would be absolutely prepared. I've said this from the beginning, and I continue to say it, that I'd be absolutely prepared to work with Sonia or Adam or anyone else in any political party if it's going to advance the interests of British Columbians. I am not wed to any particular point of view other than making sure I can do my level best to keep people safe, healthy, and secure through the pandemic and make sure that we are as strong coming out of this as we were going into it.
So are you saying that if you had a majority government that you would be cooperating with other parties, that you would be consulting with them?
Absolutely. That's my style. That's who I am. I believe that we've had success, not just in the legislature, but broadly in the community, because I have reached out to business leaders. I have reached out to labor leaders and brought them together with not-for-profits, with Indigenous groups, environmental organizations, to try and find the common ground that we all need to find for our communities to prosper and our economy to grow. That's who I am. I'm not going to change that. If there's a good idea, I don't care where it comes from. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, City Editor Cassidy Olivier, do you have a question?
Yes, hi Premier, how are you?
Good.
I'm kind of riffing on points that Vaughn has raised in the past and other colleagues over in Victoria. Just curious a bit, we've seen different kind of versions of John Horgan over the years. We've seen kind of the angry opposition leader, the happy warrior, Langford John, and I'm just kind of curious now, like, who are we seeing? Your opponents have characterized you as a double crosser, disingenuous. You know, you look in the mirror today, and you know who's looking back at you.
An older John Horgan. That's what's looking back at me. No, I am who I am. I've always been who I am. How other people characterize me is their business. When you're the leader of the opposition, and I said this at the time, and I've said it on behalf of Andrew, not so recently, but when we're in the legislature, the toughest job in politics is to be the leader of the opposition, because your job is to hold the government accountable. The Queen pays you every couple of weeks to throw rocks at people and to try and make policies better. In a perfect world, we can talk about this as we're just trying to work together to make things better. But at the end of the day, you people cover politics. You want fire. You want sparks so that you can write about it in your newspapers. So it's a tough job. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I don't think, by the looks of it, Andrew Wilkinson enjoys it either. Having said all of that, I am who I am. And I am passionate. I am focused on people always. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that I was doing my best to lift up my neighbors in Langford and the people of British Columbia. That's my singular focus, and it always has been. How people interpret my personality is entirely up to them.
Thanks. Reporter Gordon Hoekstra, do you have a question?
Good afternoon. I do. Just following up on the idea of cooperation and a more harmonious legislature or parliament. I mean, it's something that Sonia has talked about quite a bit, John, and the notion that a minority government makes for better government because people are more cooperative and they listen to each other's ideas. And you were saying if you had a majority government that you'd be willing to work with the other parties. Is there any way to, beyond saying that, formalize that in some way? Have you given any thought to that? I mean, whether that's even something as simple as having a actual meeting with the people once a week, or because otherwise it sort of leaves, I think, a lot of people probably who follow politics with the impression that it's just words. Is there some way to actually put something concrete to that?
Yes, there is. It's called proportional representation. And the people of British Columbia rejected that. But that ensures that the diversity of opinions in the community is in the legislature. We do not have that here. We have a first-past-the-post system, which is a winner-take-all model. But the people in the legislature determine how it functions. And it's up to not just the leader of the government, it's up to all members of the legislature to adopt that attitude. And there are many Liberals who I have a very strong working relationship, and I suspect will continue to if they're reelected. I want to use an example of other leaders in the community. Jerry Thiessen's the mayor of Vanderhoof. I'm sure, Gord, you know him, and he is not a New Democrat. But I have sat twice over the past 3 years in the council chambers in Vanderhoof, unlike any premier ever, according to the historians in Vanderhoof, not because I was currying votes or favor, but because I wanted to hear from him, because I don't have a member in my caucus that has an understanding of the issues in Vanderhoof or Fort St. James or throughout all the way through to Burns Lake. So my approach has been, where I have gaps in my knowledge or my ability to meet the needs of British Columbians, I seek out that knowledge. And I don't care, again, where it comes from, Liberal, Green, Conservative, it doesn't matter. I want to be as informed as I can be to make the best decisions possible. And that's how I will operate after the 24th of October. That's how I've been operating up to this point in time.
So are you opening up the possibility that proportional representation will be presented to the people of British Columbia again?
I guess I was being John the Happy Warrior there, giving you the obvious answer. No, I have no intention of revisiting that. Three times the charm, as they say. And I'm hopeful that at some time in the future, elected representatives will look at the success that we had through 2017 to 2020 before a pandemic hit us all and say, well, how can we institute changes in how we govern ourselves? And perhaps that will come in the next parliament. But my focus is on making sure that we get through this. People are safe, they're healthy, and they're secure, and that we're building back to a place where we can continue to lead the country in economic growth, get our unemployment rate down, and make sure that the businesses that are struggling right now can recover, and we can carry on to be the prosperous part of our great and spectacular country. But no, I'm not. I don't know how much. Do I have to be even more clear than that? I have no intention of talking about proportional representation other than in a casual remark to my good friends at the Vancouver Sun.
No, that's fine. No, we understand. But, let's say, imagine we were working under a proportional representation in this election. Would you have called an early election?
I don't know, because we're not. We're working under the system that we have. And my challenge is that if you think that politics has left the building, you weren't watching Question Period this summer. If you think that there was harmonious agreement on all things, you didn't see bills that got stopped as a result. So I think that the challenges that we face are profound. And we don't have challenges for just the next few months. We have challenges for the next few years. And I believe now is the time at the beginning of the pandemic. It's going to be here in the spring. It's likely to be here in the fall and beyond. Let's put the election behind us and bring in a new legislature. 87 people, almost 20 people aren't running again. So that renewal should be happening in those communities, and it should be happening across the province. I think it's a good, quick start, reboot of our government to meet the extraordinary challenges ahead.
All right. So back to Jennifer for a second question.
Yeah, based on what you were just saying, things were going well with the Greens and in the legislature, and then you're thinking it broke down during the summer. People accuse you of being an opportunist for having this election at this time, and things seem to be going well, at least on the surface, for health and economic recovery plans. What do you say to that criticism that it's merely opportunism and not actually, for the better of the province?
Well, I accept that criticism, but what we've seen over the past 3 weeks is choices. Stark choices between how the Liberals would approach the coming months, how the Greens would approach the coming months, and how my team would approach the coming months. And those choices are there for British Columbians to look at, and they will decide where they want to go and who they want to lead them. It's never a bad idea to do that. It's up to others to judge me on this decision, but it was mine and mine alone. And I believe that it's in the best interest of the people of British Columbia to have a stable government and to say the politics are past. A renewed mandate for the legislature means that everybody who's sworn in after the ballots are counted will be focused on making life better in their communities. I remember when I was first elected, I was very excited to get going and working to make sure Langford and Souk and other communities I represented had a voice in the legislature. That will happen, and I think nothing but good can come from that, because we will have fresh eyes and perhaps fresh ideas in all three political parties to take us through the next couple of years.
Do you understand where the criticism comes from, though, that opportunism, criticism?
Well, 3.5 years is a long time for minority governments. I believe that some of you here commented at the time that we wouldn't last 6 weeks, 6 months, and here we are. So criticism is going to be involved in the work that I do, and I accept it. And I try and improve myself every day. I take criticism as constructive. And if people are characterizing me that way, I'll absorb that and try and be better tomorrow.
Valerie.
I'm here, Harold.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Valerie, and then to Vaughn.
Yeah, thank you. And just in answering Gord Hoaxer a moment ago, you were talking about listening to and cooperating with people in some of the rural areas or the north. Which brings to mind the fact that your own members or constituency association wasn't very happy up in Fraser-Nicola with the nomination process. And then there was also a bit of what I would call sleight of hand in Stikine when Anita McPhee was sidelined in favor of Nathan Cullen. So rural ridings are important. They're very far from the Lower Mainland here. But I guess my question is, why don't why don't you? Why can't you respect your own process and your own equity mandate, and then the people of the North at the same time, right?
You completely mischaracterized the situation in Stikine. Perhaps if you did some research, you would know that 15 local individuals were asked if they wanted to seek the nomination, and none of them said they would. We then asked Nathan Cullen if he would be prepared to run, and he said he would. Ms. McPhee was not a member of the NDP, which is a basic criteria for seeking the nomination. So a more in-depth research would have a better understanding of that situation. On one side of Nathan Cullen is Nicole Hallbauer, a Gitxsan woman who I'm very proud to call my candidate in Skeena. On the other side is Anne-Marie Sam, a Nakazli woman who I'm very proud to call a candidate for my team. And in Fraser-Nicola, Erin Shumahetsa is a leader of the Lower Nicola First Nation. I am proud of our equity mandate. The proof is in the pudding. The results are in the candidates that we've nominated. I am unapologetic about that.
I think Anita McPhee put her name up quite early in the process, didn't she?
She did not. There was no process because Doug Donaldson decided he wasn't going to run in September. She wasn't a member of the party. So that's kind of a basic criteria for all political parties. You have to be kind of part of it before you say, hey, I'd like to be the candidate. And she lives in Vancouver, so she doesn't live in Stikine. I don't know. There's nothing more to say about it. It's over. Nathan Cullen is the candidate, being wildly supported by his community, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So if you want to continue to sow discontent, carry on. But I would look at the equity in other parties before I started casting stones at ours. We've worked very hard to get where we are, and I'm proud of that work.
Right. Well, we're talking about your party right now, right?
Exactly. And I'm telling you that you're misrepresenting the situation.
What about the resignations of the NDP Constituency Association?
Erin Shumahetsa is going to be an outstanding candidate. There were people who preferred another candidate. That wasn't happening, and there was plenty of time for Mr. Lally to put his name forward. He didn't. So again, revisionist history or half-truths is not going to get us to a conclusion. I'm proud of the team we've got together, and I'm very confident that they're going to get elected in these communities, and they're going to serve them well.
Well, members of the executive up there said that Aaron just showed up at election time and didn't show up the rest of the year.
Well, perhaps you should have talked to some other people beyond those that said that they were plumping for another candidate. Better research would get you to the point of knowing that Erin Shumahetsa is an Indigenous leader, has been in the community, ran last time, has been a member consistently throughout. So you're just telling a story that you want to tell rather than the reality on the ground.
I know that what you just said is true, but also he did not have.
If it's true, then what else why are we having a conversation if it's true? Are you seeking the truth or are you seeking controversy?
I think it's controversial when 13 people resign because they don't like the candidate. So
13 people resigned because they preferred another candidate who didn't put his name in. So carry on with the story. Aaron is an outstanding candidate, and he'll do very, very well for the people in his community.
We're just talking about process.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Vaughn, over to you.
Premier, did I pick up on the other day you suggesting that as soon as the results are certified, and we recognize that may take a while, and the writ's returned, if you're still government, it would be your intention to call the legislature back for a late fall session, if possible?
Depending on the timing, Vaughn, if the Elections BC can do their work expeditiously, that would be my intention, correct.
And would that be in order because you'd have to pass the legislation to approve the recovery money for families and the recovery money for individuals, because that's not approved yet?
The monies that are in our platform are not approved. Those are new dollars that we put into our platform to demonstrate to the people of British Columbia where we want to go. The monies that were approved in the legislature, $6+ billion, the largest expenditure between budgets in BC history, was passed by the legislature, approved by Treasury Board and then by Cabinet. And those dollars, as you know, are going out. Criteria have been put in place for grants, and the government is functioning. Those dollars are being distributed. So the additional dollars that are in our platform and the other policies that we want to bring forward would require legislation, yes.
And would it be your intention if, as you say, the election returns and all that permit, to get those amounts approved so the money could go out to people before Christmas?
I'm sorry, Bon, you're going to have to say that again. You broke up a little bit. Sorry.
I hear what you're saying about the stuff that's already approved and pointing to the stuff that in the platform isn't approved yet. So I'm just wondering about the workload for a late fall session. Would it be your intention to approve the $1,000 for families, the $500 for individuals qualifying, so that the money could go out before Christmas?
It would be my intention to do that if we could. And again, I'm assuming that a new legislature would want to meet to get their offices worked out and all of the other logistics that happen after elections, which you know full well. And if we're there, a sitting of the legislature, it would likely be virtual, as we did through the summer, would be appropriate. And I would want to move as expeditiously as possible to ensure that we're keeping people healthy and whole as we come through the pandemic.
Would you also be seeking to bring in the provision on certification votes that Harry Baines tried to get through before, but that the Greens blocked?
With respect to changes to the labor code or employment standards or other issues like that, I believe we would carry forward looking at renewal, working with all of the stakeholders, business, labor, and others to see what was acceptable. It was part of the review, as you know, wasn't supported and brought forward by the panel that we appointed, not supported by the Greens, but it wouldn't be something I would be looking at certainly in the fall, not at all, perhaps as the mandate proceeds, given the need. But for me right now, the priority is the pandemic and making sure that we can protect British Columbians.
Thank you, Premier.
Thank you. So, Mr. Horgan, you mentioned in, I think it was the radio debate, I kind of mixed the two up, but
there were two different animals, man. I don't know.
There were definitely two different animals.
One civil and focused, and one what it was. So
very different. It should look very different. You're right. You told the story of AJ, a young man that you had met, clearly benefited from modular housing and is turning his life around. And I think we can all agree that's a very positive story. However, it doesn't disguise the reality that the number of people living on the streets is going up. You know, in 2019, the homeless count in Vancouver grew over the previous year and reached the highest number since 2005. Same across Metro Vancouver, highest number. So the homeless count has actually came down under the Liberals and then has gone back up under the NDP.
Wait a second. Went down under the Liberals during which period? 2000.
Well, I'm just saying
it didn't come down between 2014 and 2017. It went up 30%.
No, but what I'm talking about, if this is the highest number since.
Well, but you give me some context, Harold. You can't. Let's talk apples and oranges, or apples and apples, I should say. Tell me when it went down under the Liberals, and then we can have a conversation. Because my recent experience as a member of the legislature was not that.
Well, you know, it may not have gone down much, but clearly, if the highest
it went up 30%. It went up 30% between 2014 and 2017.
Well,
30%.
You go back and look at the counts for the city of Vancouver. 2005 was the highest up until last year. Right? So that was the highest up until last year. So clearly it had been lower than what we've seen under your government.
Okay, well, I'll accept that, but and it really doesn't matter. The challenge is there. We can quibble over how we characterize it. The challenge is that we have vulnerable populations that are living in encampments and communities that are concerned about that. The challenge we have collectively is trying to keep an eye on people like AJ when we're having these conversations. These aren't people from another universe. These are people from our community, through no fault of their own in many instances, have found themselves without employment, perhaps with addictions, perhaps with mental health challenges, and then consequently on the streets of our communities, not just in the Lower Mainland, but right around BC. So my commitment is to redouble my efforts to make sure we're building enough housing to keep people out of the weather, but more importantly, making sure we're training enough people to provide the services that they need. And that is, again, an area where I think we've done a pretty good job of creating spaces in our post-secondary institutions, reducing barriers to education. I'll tell another story because that's what feeds me. I talked to a woman named Sophia yesterday. She sent me a letter to tell me how transformative the tuition waiver was for former kids in care. She had had a very difficult period, a health issue that I don't need to share with you. She had a young child and an out-of-work husband, and she saw an ad just after we announced the tuition waiver, and it changed her life. She went and got some adult basic education at no cost, continued working full time, upgraded, went to BCC, became an LPN, and now she's working at St. Paul's helping people. And she had despair in 2017, and now she has hope in 2020. That's how I look at all of these issues, as people, AJ, Sophia, whoever they may be. We need to make sure that we're putting in place programs that help those vulnerable populations on the whole continuum of challenges with opioid addiction, with the overdose deaths, homelessness. All of those are wrapped into one big ball, and we have to unravel that and make sure that we don't lose sight of the people. And that means training more healthcare workers, building more supply. The pandemic has transformed shelter beds are no longer an option because of the proximity in confined areas. That's contributed significantly to the challenge. I don't think we should lose sight of that. I'm not dodging on this, Harold. This is a profound challenge, and we all need to put our shoulder to the wheel. Communities need to continue to be compassionate. The vast majority of them are. But there is at some point, we have to find better ways to help those vulnerable populations. I'm very excited about the Riverview lands being repurposed to be sanctuaries of health. And the city of Coquitlam is very excited about that as well. These are the types of initiatives that we need to be able to build institutions, not going back to the Riverview of yesterday, but the Riverview lands of the future. And that may well be the salvation for countless hundreds of people in the Lower Mainland. And I'm very excited about those prospects.
If your strategy is working, though, Mr. Premier, shouldn't the number of homeless people be going down, not up?
I didn't say the strategy was working. I said that the challenges are profound, and they've been compounded by the pandemic. We've had shelter beds that have been closed because we can't have people in close proximity, and that's led to an increased challenge. But I'm not giving up. Far from it. I'm going to continue working with a view to those whose lives have been changed because they've had access to housing. We have a very ambitious housing program. Modular housing is working. Wraparound services in those houses is working for people, and we need to redouble our efforts, working with municipalities, working with the federal government, and I have a good working relationship with the federal government. That's going to be helpful to all of us going forward, should I be successful. And we need everybody tugging on this. It's not a problem that just arrived, but it's a problem that we all need to collectively work on if we're going to fix it.
Okay, back to Jennifer for another question. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Jennifer.
Turn my microphone off. So as you said, Premier, this is about people. What about, little Johnny going to school in Surrey in a portable, when 3 years ago the NDP said that they were going to replace portables with real classrooms, but they just keep adding more portables in Surrey. And a district treasurer was recently quoted saying Surrey will never get close to zero portables. What do you say to those people?
I say it was a promise 5 years ago, and the BC Liberals did zero in the intervening 2 years. So the problem was added 1,000 students in year one, 1,000 students in year two. So the problem was compounded by a lack of action by the former government. 18 schools either underway or expansions being done. We have more work to do. A $9 billion infusion into our capital budget, the largest capital budget in BC history, will now make it all the easier for us to get those projects built and new projects underway. This will stimulate economic activity through construction during the pandemic. It's all good. As far as I'm concerned, we need to continue to focus on solving the problems as best we can based on the materials we have at our disposal. I believe that investments in schools and hospitals and other infrastructure is a very, very high priority for British Columbians, and I'm committed to delivering on that.
Do you feel like you'll ever catch up in Surrey, though?
I'm going to do my level best.
It keeps growing.
I'm going to do my level best. Every journey starts with the first step. We've got 18 schools underway in 3 years and more to do.
Also related to education, there was a promise back in 2017 about providing $30 million a year to the education system so people have school supplies that they need. If I'm not mistaken, that still hasn't happened. So is this a priority this time around?
Well, we've worked on a couple of areas on outside of the core education budget. You'll know that playgrounds, which are, in my opinion, fundamental to our elementary schools, were traditionally under the BC Liberals fundraised by bake sales, by parent advisory councils. We said that enough of that. Parents have got enough to worry about, and if you're going to be raising additional dollars, it shouldn't be for physical infrastructure in our public institutions. So we have been building playgrounds across British Columbia, relieving pressure on parents and allowing them to focus on other fundraising for their schools as they will want to do. In terms of the school supply issue, I believe that's in the platform again, and I'll have to get back to you on that. It's not top of mind for me. But I hear your question. I'll do my best to get an answer to you.
Thank you. Gord, another question?
Yes, thanks, Premier. Obviously, around the world, including in Canada and other provinces, many people are, going into deeper deficit budgeting, which is going to increase our debts. At some point, hopefully, this pandemic is going to ease, perhaps with a vaccine or some other treatments. What do you have given any thought to how we, get out of those deficits and those debts, and how we're going to pay for that, and perhaps, a corollary to that is, how do we, prime the economic pump, so to speak, in British Columbia? At what point do you start giving some thought to that, and what does that look like?
Well, I give that thought every day, Gord, and I would be remiss if I didn't. But the challenges are profound. You'll remember not that long ago, it seems like 10,000 years, but we had the strongest balance sheet in the country, highest credit rating, lowest unemployment, debt to GDP ratio was the envy of North America, much less the envy of Canada. So we have some space, I believe, to make sure that we are stimulating economic activity. That's why the $9 billion more capital dollars. The budget deficit this year will be significant, and we'll be working, should we be successful, coming back in the fall to start back on the budget work that was already underway in the previous cabinet. So we're going to continue to work on trying to stimulate growth and try and grow our way out of it. I don't think that's inconsistent with any other modest open economies around the world. We need to attract private sector investment. We've demonstrated that. I oftentimes, I understand I was criticized for not saying loudly enough that the NDP landed the largest single private sector investment in Canadian history. I might as well say it now since this is being recorded. I'm proud of that. I think British Columbians are benefiting as a result of that. And that's the sort of thing I want to continue doing. My approach to public office is to be a catalyst for positive change in people's lives. We need to continue to grow our economy, but we need to do it within the confines of what British Columbians believe is the best way forward, in a sustainable way, focusing on growing our economy within our Clean BC targets to reduce greenhouse gases and lead again, as we have been for the past couple of years, on climate action. I think you can do both of those things at the same time, but it's challenging. And that's why we have a memorandum of understanding with the BC Business Council, the large employers in British Columbia, about how we can continue to drive down our emissions and also see growth in our economy.
To that point, you mentioned the major LNG project that's going forward. I know Mr. Wilkinson has said that he'd like to see a second project go forward. How do you feel about that? Also, given the fact that you're trying to reduce emissions and have a long-range plan for that.
Well, again, I believe that the BC Liberals like to promise lots of stuff. That was the old way, and it continues to be their way, I suppose. Clean BC is where we're going. We've made that abundantly clear to oil and gas interests in British Columbia and beyond. We believe that we can fit the emission profile of LNG Canada within our plan. And I also want to highlight that we put 2,900 STEM seats into our post-secondary institutions in the first term. We have committed to 2,000 more. And the challenges of our future will be unlocked by the scientists that we're training right now. And I want to make sure we're training as many people in British Columbia to unlock these mysteries and to make sure that we're doing what we can to be innovative, creating economic opportunity through that. So Mr. Wilkinson is promising things that they never delivered before, and good for him. I'm going to make sure that I'm focusing on staying within our climate targets and also seeing economic development in every corner of the province.
Could there be another LNG plant within the plan, do you think?
I think where the former government ran afoul was that they speculated that there was going to be a chicken in every pot and an LNG plant in every port. And I'm just not going to do that. If investors want to come forward with their ideas, if they can do it in a way that does not disrupt our climate goals, I'm delighted to talk to them.
Mr. Horgan, Selena Robinson was out today calling for, I don't know if it's a third or fourth Liberal candidate to resign or step down because of comments they've made. I've lost track of the numbers, to be honest. One of your candidates, Scott Andrews.
Aren't you supposed to be paying attention, though, Harry?
I'll have to refer back to my notes,
Okay.
our own coverage.
Okay.
One of your candidates, Scott Andrews, referred to Hamas as, quote, directly in tune with public opinion and, quote, dynamic, flexible, and representative organization. So in addition to, of course, being listed as a terrorist organization.
I don't even know what that means, man. You're going to have to speak in English to me. I don't even know what that means, what you just said.
That Hamas is directly in tune with public opinion. That's his view.
Okay.
It's a dynamic, flexible, and representative organization. That's how Scott Andrews described Hamas.
Well, it's not
a terrorist organization, and Hamas, you probably also know, enforces gender segregation and criminalizes homosexuality. So, how are these views acceptable?
It's certainly not my views, and they're not acceptable to me. That's pretty strained language there, though. I think you would edit that out a little bit if you got that copy over your desk. So I don't know what that means, but I do know that it's not my view, and I believe that British Columbia is an inclusive jurisdiction where all of the diversity of the world can be found, and I'm very proud of that, and I know all British Columbians are as well.
So nothing you clearly haven't reviewed Scott Andrews' previous statements then on this, or you have not been concerned enough to review them to see if he should be a candidate for your party.
That comment is new to me. I'm happy to go back and try and read it a couple of times so it can make sense to me. But the view of my party is that this is an inclusive jurisdiction. Everyone here is welcome of all different perspectives. We have differences of opinion on international relations. I suppose we do. But my view is that international relations are the responsibility of the federal government. What Mr. Andrews' opinions are not going to affect mine or the government of British Columbia.
Is that not the same position that Mr. Wilkinson took? You know, my party is inclusive and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I don't think so. I think we were talking about pretty drastic homophobic views about things like conversion therapy, and that's quite different and a consistent view by one individual over a long period of time. I'm not familiar with the comments from Mr. Andrews, and I'll certainly go and take a look at it. But it certainly hasn't been, he's not a member of the legislature, as Mr. Thronis has been. And again, it did not come to my attention. I'll look into it. But it's not a view, if I understood what you said, it's not a view, I don't support that, and nor does the province of British Columbia.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, Olivier, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do. And I'm just being stubborn, Premier. So with respect, I'm just going back onto the point you have made in the past about this. We need to get beyond the politics. And I think people are just having, at least in our newsroom, at least, or I'll say myself, just having a hard time squaring that, because this is obviously about politics. It's a political move, and it's a very, for you, I guess, benefits you. If you win a majority, that benefits you a lot. So I understand this argument about, well, it's good for British Columbians, sure, but it's also very good for you and your party. So kind of backing up to the original kind of question I had asked, like, so you look in the mirror, so I think British Columbians, perhaps, or I'll just rephrase, maybe British Columbians, I think, might be seeing a different kind of John Horgan. And are you okay with that?
Well, again, I am who I am, and I made this decision. I wrestled with it. I had experienced the past summer. I've been engaging with weekly with premiers across the country, getting regular briefings from public health officials on the challenges we face, talking to leaders in the business community about the profound impacts about currently and will be into the fall and into the spring with respect to our economy. And I just did not believe that if we had one eye on an election, that would be the best way for BC to go forward. I don't know how many different ways I can say this. This is how I felt. and it was my call and my call alone. There's lots of advice on these questions. I made the determination that let's put the choices out there for British Columbians. When is it a bad idea to ask British Columbians what they think? I don't think there's never a bad time to do that, particularly after 3.5 years since the last election, which many have argued, and many of you have written, was inconclusive. The difference in popular vote between the BC NDP and the BC Liberals was less than 1,000 or just over 1,000. It wasn't very many. And we have governed well, I believe, for the past 3.5 years in partnership with the Green Caucus to produce good results for British Columbians. But the challenges ahead are not for the next few months, they're for the next few years. And so let's get this out of our system. Let's have an election. Let's put choices before British Columbians and let them decide. I look at myself in the mirror saying, I believe I made the right choice.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Saltman?
Yeah, Premier, if we do see the NDP reelected, do you have any concerns that, you're going to have virtually a new cabinet and you're losing a lot of experience in there? Carol James, for instance, at the best of times, being a cabinet minister means having to learn, a ton of stuff in a very short time. Now people are having to do it amidst a pandemic in a crisis situation. Do you have any concerns about a transition?
Not at all. Not at all. We have a very solid team and more to come. There are new MLA, new candidates that I'm hopeful will be reelected that are going to bring a great deal of new experience to the legislature, new energy, new ideas. And I think my expectation is that the people of British Columbia choose to put their support behind me and my team. We will hit the ground running. I am very confident of that. Even though
they might not have the experience in whatever ministry that you put them in, obviously they're going to be smart people.
Yeah. I come from the professional public service. I have tremendous confidence in the professional public service, and they have been working extraordinarily over the past 7 months. People don't get the credit that they deserve, but everyone from policy analysts all the way up to deputy ministers in the public service of British Columbia have been doing everything they can to make life better for British Columbians, and they will continue to do that. The swearing in of new ministers is part and parcel of a transition from the past government to the future government. We have a lot of ministers that are going to be, I'm hopeful, returned by their communities. And I'm confident that our government will be as strong as the last one. Will I miss Carol James? More than I could possibly say to you. But there's nothing more I can say than that. She has been a rock for the people of BC and a rock for me personally, and I will miss her more than I can possibly say. But life goes on. Carol knows that, and she's got my back, and she's going to be just around the corner, about a 2.5-minute walk. Vaughn, from the legislature, I know how to find her.
You're going to rely on the ministers you have that are experienced in the public service to guide, those new people in those new positions.
3.5 years ago, we were all new, and here we are. So this is the
pandemic happening at that time.
But we have a strong core that's returning. Adrian Dix is going to be returning. I'm fairly confident the people of Kingsway will say, Adrian, you're doing okay. I can't imagine anything different. I hope I'm not being too boastful there, but I'm confident we're going to have a solid team, and I have if the people send us back, we're going to do our level best to meet their needs.
Harold?
Oh, yeah, Vaughn, go ahead.
Premier, hearing a little bit of unease in the provincial capital at the directive that people should expect to start coming back to the office. People wondering if it's safe. And I recognize the island has a very low case count, but just wondering if it's safe, wondering if the resources and space is there, and wondering about the urgency of doing it. Is that going to be okay? Are you confident that can be done?
Well, that's not something I've been briefed on, Vaughn, so I don't know. I have, as you know, every confidence in Don Wright, the head of the public service. He's not going to put anybody at risk. The case count is low on Vancouver Island, to be sure. We have measures in place, certainly in my office prior to dissolution, that kept people safe. And I'm certainly not going to mandate anyone to come into an unsafe environment. And I'll leave that to the people that run the public service to make those choices. Those aren't political choices. I understand you weren't asking me in that context, but I have every confidence that people will be returning to their workplaces when it's safe to do so.
Wanted to ask you about the white privilege question. So, as you know, I've been covering BC politics forever, and I don't think I've ever heard that question come up before. I heard your answer, and I thought, that's about what somebody, if I would have expected someone to say in your position. I was struck by how quickly you came out and corrected and said what you wished you'd said. And I'm not disputing either of that. But the one thing that seemed to me that I was taken aback is how fast the culture has changed around that issue. I'd be interested in hearing your perspective just on that issue.
Well, it's generational, Vaughn, and that's perhaps why it sounded normal to you. The question was odd. It was at the end. It was at the end, and me too. So I'm not throwing you under the bus, Vaughn. But it was at the end of the debate, and I was looking to the door, quite frankly. I'm thinking, okay, we're almost done here. Here's the last question. And the way Shachi characterized it, I just went to my childhood. She said, "What is your personal experience?" So that's where I went to. I reflected on it after the words had come out of my mouth, because I know I've got young people of color in my caucus, as you know, Ravi Kalon, Bowen Ma, Katrina Chen, and their life experience is not yours and mine. I personify white privilege. I'm a big, large white male, and I get the title premier. So life's good for me. I've never been carded. I've never been pulled over because of the color of my skin. I've never been looked at sideways by people in restaurants or in crowds. That's not my life experience. But I need to absorb that, and I do that by hanging with people who do live that experience. We've taken extraordinary steps to reduce inequality and intolerance in our society. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was a step in that direction. Reestablishing the Human Rights Commission was a step in that direction. We need to work every day on not just saying racism is bad, but putting in place policies that make sure that we are anti-racist in our approaches. And I've learned from the young people of color that I have in my group, and we're adding, hopefully, more young people of color. And I have to learn every day as a large white male that there are a whole bunch of things that I do not experience, but I do not have to turn them aside. We need to be empathetic, but more importantly, we need to do actions, and that's what I'm focused on. And I responded as quick as I did, Vaughn, because quite frankly, I know that it's hurtful to people to say, I don't see you. I do see people, and I do see their challenges. I went to a place that I was comfortable with, because in my upbringing, I saw people, well, first of all, I'm actually colorblind, which you know, Vaughn, because I say it every other day. But quite seriously, that's how I grew up. And so I need to learn every day as a big white male that there are other people in our community that are not experiencing the same things that I am. And I want to make sure that I am doing everything I can to relieve discomfort and make sure that we're as inclusive as we possibly can. And systemic racism is just that. If we say I don't see it, then that's systemic, and we need to fix that. And we're on our way to doing that, and it's not something that happens in a give me a minute and a half answer in a debate during an election campaign. We need to have these conversations every day. And the good news about the debate is that I have been talking about it for the past couple of days, and people are talking about it at their kitchen tables. And people are saying, yeah, you know, that's right. I don't have that concern because I have white privilege. Understanding what that means doesn't diminish you as a person. It puts you in the context of a diverse, multicultural community. That's a longer answer than I expected to give you.
May I quickly just follow up on that, because I was interested in that as well. And sorry if you already did answer this, Premier, but was that a decision you made immediately? Like, as it came out of your mouth, you knew you were going to have to walk that back, or did you, were your aides quickly texting you? Was it a bit of both, or?
Well, it was a bit of both, quite frankly. But again, it was, I listened to the other two answers, and they didn't seem to do anything for me. And I'm not being dismissive of my counterparts on the stage. This is not, it's all well and good to sit in your office and say, those people are terrible. I wouldn't have answered it that way. It's tough to stand there and come up with a cogent answer to complex issues in a minute and a half. So I don't mean to dismiss them, but as I was listening to them and reflecting on how do I answer this question? How do you talk about systemic racism in a minute and 30 seconds? And I just went to that place that was familiar to me. And as I did that, I said, well, it's not about me, because I am this big guy. I do not experience systemic racism. So it was that as it came out of my mouth. And also, when I got back to the green room and said, you're about to go on, this has hurt some people that work with me, right? And that was certainly not my intention at all. And so it was very important to me to say to the younger generation. I just interestingly got a text from one of my best friend's daughters, who's 32, white, and she was proud that we were shining light on something that her generation, the 30-somethings, are dealing with every single day. And I believe we need to shine light on these issues and embrace them and take them on. And that's why I said what I did coming out of the debate. And I am quite pleased. That's a weird way to say it. I am glad that we're continuing to have this discussion, because we have to have it all the time, not just at a debate during an election campaign. We need to talk about it all the time.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the opioid crisis, and of course, in the context also of homelessness, but the broader issue of addiction, it does seem that more and more people in society are recognizing that it is a health issue. Addiction is a health issue, at least so those who are at least partway there. But when are we going to get to the point where I can walk into a hospital with my care card the same way I can for a broken leg and get treatment immediately? Because we're not there yet.
I agree. We took a major step forward by being the first jurisdiction in the country to have a standalone ministry of mental health and addictions. But it's not just about putting up the sign and saying open for business. You need to be able to be sure that you're training enough professionals, healthcare professionals, to meet that challenge. You need to be ensuring that you have treatment beds and other healthcare provisions for those who are suffering from mental health and addictions. We need to destigmatize not just opioid addictions, but also mental health challenges. And there are the public sector is doing that. The private sector is doing that. The Canucks, the Lions, these symbols within our community saying, all of us are in this together. Mental health, opioid challenge, or addiction challenges, they're there for all of us, our brothers, our sisters, our workmates. And that diminishing the stigma around these challenges, ensuring that there are appropriate treatment opportunities, pharmaceutical alternatives to the poisonous street drugs is critically important, and we're working in that direction. Dr. Henry pushed us in that direction in 2018, and we're going as fast as we can. The community has to be with this as well. Not everyone in the community looks at it as you and I would, Harold. So that's an education process. So there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done. I was proud to stand with police chiefs across Canada to call on the federal government to actually decriminalize. But in British Columbia, Mike Farnworth directed law enforcement, when we were sworn in, that said we will not be prosecuting simple possession. But it's a criminal code issue, and I think the federal government can make a symbolic statement by saying, look, we're not talking about criminals here. We're talking about people who need help. Now, having said that, there are criminals involved in the distribution of poison drug supply. So enforcement has to be a key part of this. And I think British Columbians understand that. And we need to make sure we're redoubling our efforts to have all four pillars in place so that we can tackle this as collectively going forward. Because it could be any one of us that we're looking at right now could become addicted to opioids or some other more harmful substances. We need to be mindful of that every day. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Right. We could try to squeeze in one more question if we could. Valerie Castleton?
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Horgan, you made a reference in the conversations that you've had with the Business Council. And the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade has been polling its members, and 24% of them are really concerned about their ability to survive over the next year. Yeah. And Andrew Wilkinson has tried to carve this out as a particular area of concern for himself, but I'm interested in what you think about ways to stimulate small and medium-sized businesses. And can you just speak a little bit to what your platform is regarding that?
Sure. Well, we have a targeted PST reduction on machinery equipment. Some $470 million has been allocated to allow businesses who are expanding or modifying their operation to meet the challenges of COVID-19. That makes sense to me. It doesn't blow a massive hole in the budget. It doesn't help me get a new Lexus. It just helps businesses reboot and retool for the changing marketplace that they operate in. We also have a tax credit for businesses who are hiring or increasing their payroll, another $200 million there. Those are tax changes that took effect in September. They're happening right now. We have $300 million for small businesses in grants. Those criteria are now out. I understand by a couple of reports in other papers that there are some frustrations with the criteria, but you have to have a set of rules to give out public money. It's not, and these are not decisions that are made by politicians. They're made by professional public servants. Here's the criteria. Applications are being accepted. Some applications will be rejected. And then we'll hopefully try and amend and modify the criteria to make sure that we're not excluding too many people. But you have to have some mechanisms to measure how you distribute monies into the private sector. But there's a whole host of other things. We've got a strategic investment fund in the Stronger BC plan that will see the province taking an equity position in commercially acceptable new ventures, mostly in the tech sector. But we have a whole bunch of initiatives within the Stronger BC plan, as well as those that we put into our platform, that I think will focus on making sure we're doing everything we can to get businesses through this challenge. On the tourism side, Mr. Wilkinson has been particularly pounding on that. I think he completely misses the point that well over 80% of British Columbians want our borders to remain closed until the rest of the world, at least our immediate neighbors, get their act together with respect to the transmission of COVID-19. That will be profound with respect to our tourism sector. Everybody gets that, including tourism operators. They asked for a task force. This is not NDP process. They asked for a task force. We provided that. We put $300 million in play so that we can figure out how we keep those businesses going. I've encouraged people to stay home this summer. Of course, most did because there was nowhere to go. But let's take advantage of this extraordinary place we live in, and let's see it through the winter. Let's get some ski lessons, get some people up to Whistler that may not have been able to get through the lineups because of all of the people that have been coming in the past. These are opportunities for us to shop local, not just for small businesses, but also to shop local for our tourism opportunities throughout the fall and into the winter.